No, there's 3 different resolutions.
Oh, there's four.
This is for the lines.
Oh, that's four. Oh, okay, I saw it.
We can.
Okay,
Lots of liquor.
I'll make a motion.
okay. Motions are second?
Second.
There's 3, bro.
For all
This
three.
is. So
No,
you want to do all
4, number 3. Just
Oh, just for number.
Four.
Okay.
15-03. So we're clear on that. We're going to approve the lines to sell 3-2 beer here at the town hall for events. Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay.
Laura does have the draft copy insurance.
Oh, yes. And along with that, as long as you're acting on the Lions, I'd like to approve to the donation of Parks Fund for $500, LG 555. So I need a motion to accept their donations to Parks Fund.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night.
Okay, next. This is the Stacy Lent Township. And this is for the Desaro to sell 3-2 beer also. The gas station over on the Rural Transit Center.
I'll make the motion.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, all's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh. Also similar for Falcon Ridge Golf Course. 3-2 beer and there's also wine.
I'll make that motion too.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, all's in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Irrigation rig refuel, we've already covered that. Okay, Mr. Mellis, what you have?
Okay. I've got a document just reading. Share. You can pass these around, please. I think most of the people in this room were here on December. Oh, you want one? Can I have one? I think most of the people in the room here were here on December the 8th when we had the special town meeting. And at that meeting, a resolution was offered and voted on to request changing the elections to November and putting that on the ballot. And as we know, that passed at the township election. And as part of that resolution, the board was required to prepare a plan on how the November election would be implemented, and especially if the 5-member board were also passed. And you did that back on February 17th. And I'm not going to go into any discussion about how that was arrived at, but I think it was clear to everyone that was at the meeting on December the 8th that the intention of having the election in November was to get the maximum voter turnout, because the November elections on the even-numbered years are when all the state and federal offices are held for general election, And the township election in March was very poorly attended. Likewise, a township election on the odd numbered years in November may be poorly attended because it will not be in conjunction with those other elections. The board did not wish to do that. The board chose to pass Resolution 2015-01 to have the election in the odd numbered years and to increase the term of the city supervisors to 6 years. Now, that was certainly the board's prerogative. The resolution that was passed in December and the way the ballot issue was worded was required by state law. It had to say, vote to change the election to the odd or the even numbered years in November. That's why there was no specific request at that meeting when the resolution was passed to make it the even numbered year. Unfortunately, that is not what the board elected to do. So I sent a letter to all of you on April the 8th, to the 3 board members, expressing my feelings about why Resolution 2015 was not a responsible way to deal with what the voters asked for and voted on at the December 8th meeting or at the town election. And I want to make, well, first of all, I'll say, I took the liberty of taking the Resolution 2015-01, which was drafted by Peter T. I took that language and simply modified it to change it back to the even numbered years and go to a 4-year term. And there's nothing else that was added or included in that draft resolution, which I sent you, which the people here are looking at tonight, that would in any way legally change or modify the impact of that resolution. So here are the points I wanted to make that I made in a letter to you and why I believe the board has not acted to fulfill the wishes of the voters. First of all, we have about 2,000 voters in Lent Township, registered voters. Yeah, we don't get a big 100% turnout for a general election, but we get a significant turnout. The historical turnout for the off-year township elections, either in March or in November, would likely remain at only about 0.5%.
How many people was that?
For a normal election?
We generally get somewhere between 100 and 200. We've had as high as 400 or 500 in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah. So we get
5%.
That's so somewhere around 5 to 10% is the average.
anyway, the point is that allowing to have the election in November of the even number of years when the general election is held would significantly increase the franchise of the Lent Township voters to participate in selecting township officers. Now, there was discussion at the December 8th meeting pro and con, but the decision of the people to vote that night was really in support of having it in conjunction with the general election. The other point I would make is that there's really a financial incentive to hold the township election in conjunction with the general election. Yeah. Whenever we hold a township election on our own, we bear all the costs. We pay the election judges, to set up here. We pay whatever work is involved for the clerk to deal with the county auditor, etc. If we do it, the election in conjunction with the November general elections on the even numbered years, those costs are already in the mix. They're not an additional cost on the taxpayers of Lent. And to have a third election in November of this year, if we went with the proposal of 2015-01, that just makes no sense. Why should the township pay for 3 elections in 1 year? That's just nonsense. And finally, the supervisor's term. Setting the supervisor's term at 6 years is just, I think, not a rational thing to do. U.S. senators have a 6-year term. I don't know what state senators get if it's 4 or 6, but state senators, no, it's not 2.
I'm sorry, I thought it was a house.
Yeah, house. But the state house is 2 years. I believe the county commissioners are what? 4. Yeah. So local governments. I can't think of any local government that has a 6-year term. And the other impact of that,
right next door.
They have 6?
6-year term.
The other impact of that, of course, is that if we want our township to be governed by citizens that generally have other jobs or interests, how many citizens are going to commit to 6 years of their life? I mean, that's a very extensive commitment. Now, there are two charts I put in here to go along with the draft resolution. The chart for the 6-year terms, as it was set in 2015 on, which by been changed now, basically, you've got the first terms going from the November of 2015 election to the November 2018 election. They're all irregular because you have to bring the supervisor's terms into line with the 6-year term. But after that, each supervisor serves 6 years, so we have one, maybe two supervisors at an election. And as far as I'm concerned, that's just a plan for stagnation. I mean, there's not going to be a chance to bring in new ideas, new people, new participation on the board if we go to a 6-year term with that kind of a spread. If you look at the chart, other chart, that would, the proposed resolution I gave you, Resolution 2015-02, you would have to have staggered years for seats D and E to begin with, but it would be a very short period of time to bring everybody into compliance with a 4-year, I've got copies of this, a 4-year election cycle. You would have either 3 or 2 supervisors come up every other year at the election. And that just furnishes a much more diverse opportunity to bring in new people, new ideas, new representation on the town board. So I would present it to you, to the board tonight, that Resolution 2015-01, as it was adopted, really was not the will of the people. I'm not going to make any arguments about why it was done, what the motives were, but the proposed resolution I have put before you here, number what I call 2015-02, would be a fulfillment of what the people expected and wanted and voted for, and would be a much more rational and a much more practical way to deal with the 5-member board and the November elections. So I would offer this for your consideration and thought. The only other thing I would say is that there is no reason to postpone action on this any further, I don't think, because the voters have spoken. The people spoke at the special meeting. I think to not carry out their wishes at this point would just be passing the buck. And I thank you for your time.
I would say at this point, this resolution, we'll take it under advisement, and if we deem it to be acted on, we can act on it after the meeting in May, after Mr. Teedy, our attorney, has had ample opportunity to review it for correctness. At present, the resolution that I have, it's actually the same number as Mr. Mills has here, 2015-02, simply amending the seats D and E to be interim terms until the election this fall. That has been approved by Mr. Teedy. We'd certainly act on this one after the election, after he's had an opportunity to review it.
Okay, so if we
definitely keep this on file, act on it in the future. The one before us, the one that was presented in our packet, what has been reviewed by Mr. Teedy, and it simply terms the seats D and E coming up for election in a couple of weeks as interim until the election is fall.
So if we adopt 2015-02 at this point, and if we have Peter go through 2015-0,
B, let's call it B.
No, it's called
2015-02B, let's call it that,
Right.
and he can approve it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
Then we can, if we vote on it after May, then after the special election, the next 2 seats that are elected, then they'll be sworn in at the May general.
They'll be sworn in at the May meeting, which is
Okay.
early days of May.
So then they would have to, then they would also be part of that vote.
Correct.
I would just like to say that if you propose, adopt or consider the adoption of the original 2015-02 as presented by the chairman tonight, you're just perpetuating the problem.
Can I make a comment? Well, again, it's kind of following up on Dave. I think they put forth a very reasonable proposal. Certainly it showed the will and the intent of the people at the election, right? And so in looking at this and putting it off, I think the people here represented want to understand the reasons that you would put it off you've given valid reasons from, to have the attorney review it. But 2015-02, just as you described it, was an omission by the current attorney in the last resolution, right? So I think from an administrative perspective, I think people would certainly like to hear the merits, or at least your opinions and discussion about the proposal at hand. Because if there is some technical clarification that needs to be resolved from Mr. Teedy's perspective or from a legal review, you can certainly follow up with that at a later date. So,
Mr. Teedy has been working with two separate attorneys and Matt, looking at the wording and timing and all, whatever you want to call it.
I understand, but I think it's a very reasonable proposal, and I think what the group doesn't want to see is this discussion go off into the supervisor or the staff meeting at a time which people are not able to attend. And that's what we're afraid of. So we certainly would like to hear the merits of the discussion as the proposal. I mean, I think that's why everybody's here today, and certainly showed up to vote. So I would ask that you not push it off for further review or for Mr. Teedy's review. As we know, you're making a correction today for something Mr. Teedy's already done and corrected at hand today. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything that complicated or technical that would prevent you from having a discussion, or at least presenting us with an opinion or your thoughts on the proposal. It seems like a common sense proposal.
The issue is changing to November elections and changing to 5-person boards, both at the same time, happens so rarely that you can't even get 3 attorneys to come up with the same.
Yeah, I know you guys are. We've seen the opinions.
It's been
but
very, very
and I
complex
understand
issue.
that, but I think as the merits in the review, that this doesn't preclude you from going out for review for technical accuracy and clarity, right?
Well, I think I'm going to chime in here just as a citizen of Lent that I'm so busy and I really, really want to have things be very easy for me. I have a hard enough time even coming here. My husband travels all the time. We came to this meeting today. It was not easy to be able to have elections happen when the other elections are happening. Good. Less money. Good. Less taxpayer dollars. Good. This is really clear to me, and I'm looking at it thinking, shorter terms, people don't get as they don't get as landlocked in decisions, an opportunity for fresh people if there's problems, don't get as bogged down, and I honestly don't know all the details. I don't know if I'm an attorney or whatever, but if an attorney can't suss this out, I can, just looking at this sitting here and thinking, so not knowing all those, lay of the land, I would just say, please make it easy for me as a citizen to vote and learn and just smooth the way, and perhaps this township can set precedents. No other township has done this by board or whatever. Well, maybe they need to, and we'll be the first ones.
I say what Mark said makes a lot of sense. The only reason I considered letting Mr. Teedy look at it was to make sure that everything is spelled out legally and we're doing it properly. But it's a good point. It was screwed up already.
Well,
it's been fixed. So the township didn't start on fire because that happened. So it's not going to happen this time either.
But the other question I have is, if you guys pass this tonight, we're going to have the election, and then if you then, after you have the 5-member board, choose to go with Mr. Mills's suggestion, then you're running into the fact that you're going to be a year and a half instead of just half a year for that
interim seat.
For the interim seat. The other issue is when the question was passed, it was clearly communicated to the constituents via our newsletter that we would be moving to, the question would move to a 5-person board, and our plan, or not the 5-person board, I'll take it back. The plan on going to November elections was that we would go to 6-year terms, and that was approved. And it is the opinion of at least some of the attorneys that Mr. Teedy is working with that in order to change that to 4-year terms would require that question be placed on a ballot. That could be placed on a ballot this fall if that's what they say.
That's incorrect, Lyle, and you know it. I wasn't going to bring this up, but you had a special work session here before you came up with this plan where none of us, there were 3 of us in the room, were allowed to say a word. The previous chairman, and you agreed with him, literally dictated Mr. Teedy what he wanted in that plan. You came up with this plan. You didn't consult with any of the people. You didn't let us speak. People have come to meetings and tried to speak up about this. You personally have ignored them. You personally have an agenda here.
I do not have an agenda.
Oh, that's all you do.
But Dave, that's
If I have an agenda, it's for stability within Lent Township. It is not to have 3/5 of the board up for election every other year, or every other election, I should say.
The whole entire Minnesota House is up for election at every general election.
And they
In
have
most
how many
communities,
representatives?
300 or something, right?
Right.
And
So
most
160, I
communities,
believe it's
including
160.
Stacy, that have 5 councilmen, do the same thing. They have multiple council people. That's irrelevant. That's a red herring. It's a specious argument.
It's an
This
option that was
community
provided
needs
by the
new
state.
blood.
But Lyle, you guys put together the plan for the 6-member board. Or the, I'm sorry, the 5-member board. 5-member board with moving the election. The citizens didn't have an opportunity to provide feedback on the creation of that plan. You chose to produce a newsletter which was very confusing and not very clear on exactly what. It certainly doesn't reflect the intent of the voters because we didn't get the vote on exactly what that was. You crafted the language to fit what the needs are and what you chose.
The language is crafted by Mr. Teedy.
Based on your
from the
intent.
board.
He didn't create it. He doesn't have any intent. His actions are based on direction from you, the board, and so he doesn't have any intent. So the intent of the election was to move. It's common sense. It wasn't to move it to the odd years, and it wasn't to have this short-term, convoluted type of transition. It seems like a very common sense approach, and to constantly lean on Mr. Teedy for clarity. That's great, and we know it's and I know we've been involved in trying to get the clarity in the resolution. We know he had to make multiple corrections to what was posted in the actual newsletter. So we know it wasn't accurate because there's a lot of different opinions. But I think the intent is very clear. The citizens wanted a common general election switch on our election, moving it from March to the general election on the normal cycle. That gets the greatest participation. I'm kind of surprised. It's the only environment you ever hear where you don't want more people to vote and to participate. And I just find this ironic.
Yeah.
We've heard the argument, and the only reason anybody does it, regardless of what size of fence you're on, is if you feel you're losing your power base. That's it. And inclusion for everybody is exactly the intent. And I think it's a great way to manage the township and every governing body. So that's all I'd have to say. And I would ask you to consider the resolution that's on the table in front of you today. And you can always seek the clarity from Mr. Teedy, which I would expect you to do. But I think we would all like to hear the merits of your discussion based on moving to something very reasonable and practical.
And I totally agree with what Mark says. It makes sense. He made a comment there, common sense.
I agree. So I'm starting to come to these meetings because I'm at fault. I never went to these meetings until I found out about some stuff that's going on. And I'll second his motion, Mr. Miller's motion too on this. I voted for a reason to have this move to the general election.
Well, in Lyle, I think we're seeing a lot of great things come in the participation, bringing a lot of different people out. This is something that we haven't had. Normally it's always, it's the impetus is the big controversial issues, right? But the participation on the Lent planning and zoning, I think we're doing a great job. Things seem to be working very well. The participation of Susanna in the adoption. I mean, all of these things are in a constant movement and are a creation of what the citizens are looking for. So I think, to stall that movement and to create more dissension between what the citizens are looking for, I think it's just clearly unfair. I mean, it is all working in conjunction. The only reason we're here today, and Sue is on the board, and we got a great donation to do some great things here, is because of the movement that has begun. And we want to continue.
I clearly agree with everyone out here. The whole intention was to have elections when the general elections were held. I was not a member on this board when those decisions were made. I'd love to know why they were put in the odd years. Right. No one's going to tell us, but
so would we.
I don't care. You know what? I don't care about that. I want to know
but there's no,
how we move forward.
People want it in the even years, so I'm absolutely for that. There's no reason to have it in the odd years. Why?
I think also having it along with the general election, the voting starts at 7 o'clock in the morning when people can come. I'm a daycare mom, have been for 28 years. And I had parents who couldn't make it to our March and all of these other elections that start at 10 o'clock in the morning because they are due to be in surgery at 11 o'clock. They can't make it in and get down to the cities to do this, get out and get to the meeting or get to the voting even at night. They have long days. I have we have a lot of professional people in here who work very long days. So to start the vote at 10 o'clock in the morning, they were absolutely pissed. I will tell you that they couldn't even make it in here.
We do have absentee voting for that.
I understand that, but some of them, because of the hours sitting in here and the hours that they are open, it doesn't work for them either.
And we also have a Saturday that we're open for absentee
Well,
voting.
I'm just saying that they were mad that they couldn't participate in what they felt was their fundamental right to come and vote. So that's one of the main reasons. They can make it into the general elections. They can work around that because the hours are conducive to that.
Good point.
And they know of it. I've lived here for 30 years. This past March is my first vote. Haven't known a thing about it. My first vote in 30 years was this past March. I don't know about my husband here either, but if he's voted, but it was my first vote, 30 years. Don't know about it till it's long after the fact.
Question.
I don't get the paper.
Well, I'm actually I'm running for CP. And so from my perspective, and I think Jerry, is it Ray Brown? You're running too. What impact are we going to have if we get on in May and by November, there's no impact that we would actually make for the months. A year and a half would actually give us a chance to make an impact on it. And I'm talking from, I'm spending probably a good chunk of money to put my name out there to sit for my volunteer seat or in that role. And it's not a matter of is it better for me or is it not better for me. I'm looking at how do I go out and tell my neighbors. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take one more comment from over here and I'll close discussion.
Okay.
My name is John Clown. I live in the township. I've seen quite a bit of publicity from the Secretary of State's office talking about the Secretary of State's effort to increase voter participation. And I think the proposal to have the township vote in even-numbered years in November is consistent with the Secretary of State's office. And so I support Dave's suggestion and Mark's second to that and other people's recommendation on that.
Okay. Can I ask one question, Lana? What would happen if you tabled this right now until TD had a chance to take a look at that? It's just a question.
That's my recommendation. I'm not certain all the items in there. This has been approved by Mr. TD. We're only changing the seats that will be up for election in a couple of weeks to interim seats until the election is fall. And if after Mr. TD has an option to look at that and maybe make some minor changes to it, if he says it's good to go, then the entire board, including the 2 new members that will be installed in May, can act on that.
The decision won't be Mr. Teedy's though, and the draft I gave you is an exact verbatim copy of the one he prepared before. Only dates have been changed.
What does that schedule look like if we stay with 6 years? Do we end up?
It ends up 1 or 2.
That's that.
One or two.
That's the page next to the back one.
That's what I want.
With 6 years, you go 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 2. With a 4-year term, you go 2.
But again,
So it's either
after
one or
get
two
everybody,
or
it's
four.
like
people after simply or after 6 full years.
Yeah.
Well, is there, I guess, I think we should say what our opinions are too. Would I serve for 6 years? Yes, I would. Is it a long commitment?
For the resolution that was passed, you were elected to 6 years has passed.
Right.
March, which actually stretches to a little over 6
Yeah.
because of the switch in November.
Am I afraid to only serve 4 years? No. Am I afraid? But if with this resolution, Am I afraid to be voted upon at the general election? No. I have nothing to fear from this. If the people out there don't want me sitting here, by all means, it's time for me to go. I have no problem with that. I want to know, and I'm going to say flat out, you know darn well this was not, what was brought to us was not the intention of the people. The intention was to have the elections, general elections in the even numbered years. Yeah, I don't really care why it happened. It doesn't matter, but it did. And I think it was done for a reason. The 6 years, what I was originally told is it was going to be a mess because of the 5 members if we didn't cycle it that way. So when Dave presented this, it kind of makes it a lot easier to see. I mean, the difference is the 6-year plan, you have 2 or 1 coming up for election. The 4-year plan, it's 3 or 2. So you have 1 more every cycle than you normally have, and it's every 4 instead of every 6.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, I have no problem with that. If, like I said, they want to vote me out.
There's an election. With the November elections, we have an election every other year. As opposed to March, we have one every year. Okay.
Or I mean with the 4-year term though. Every 2 years. But every 2 years, 2 or 3 come up versus 1 or 2. Yeah. So, I mean, personally, I don't have a problem with that. And admittedly, at first I said, okay, maybe we should have Peter T.D. look at it just to make sure everything's okay. But Mark Coran did bring up a very good point. Things weren't right in the other one, and the township didn't burn down. We didn't die because of it. So if it gets adopted, I don't think we're not sinking the Titanic here. If there is a problem in the language.
But isn't this going to be at the next election, or next meeting, which is going to be after the election?
Right.
Correct? So right now, the issue is this gets adopted or not, and then the 5-member board will vote on this, on going to the
and as of right now,
4-year or the even year election.
And as of right now, there's a difference of opinion on attorneys whether or not we can switch to.
The problem though is if you don't do this, then is this election null and void? So basically, this would be adopted. We have the election. The 5 members sit and decide on even, odd, 6-4 at the next meeting. So, in my view, it's imperative that this particular one gets, for the election, gets adopted, and then at the next meeting, that will be discussed and voted on.
Right. You need to understand that the way the law works, the vote that was held in March was to vote to either an odd or an even numbered year in a 5-member board. Before that, the law said that the town board should prepare a plan of how it would implement it. That plan is it done by a resolution. The town board can adopt, repeal, amend, adopt another resolution any time they want. It has absolutely no effect on what happened at the March election. It's not going to change anything. The only thing that's going to change is when the town board adopts and continues to administer a particular resolution, that will set the election cycle. Another town board, a year down the road, 2-3 years, could change that too. On the other hand, I could go out and get a petition tomorrow for another special town meeting and bring this up for another election in November.
So what you just said then, wouldn't it be that the town board would tell the attorney what the town board wanted, and the attorney would adopt the language that would match the resolution which the town board wants? So the town board seems to be the one, then, if that's correct, that would be in the driver's seat. And then the attorney would then offer the language that would legally make
I think the attorney has once told somebody that I can't tell you you did something illegal. I can just tell you what I think.
Getting back, this resolution is needed to have the election on the 5th.
No, it's not. It has nothing to do with the election on the 5th.
Yes, it does. The
Lyle, it does
the
not.
intent of the state law is that anyone that is appointed or elected at a special election is an interim only.
And that's what the other resolution includes that. It says in the statute, and Peter Teege's aware of it, and I cited the statute on the bottom of the chart I gave you, that one supervisor seat is served 2 years, one is served 3. By under statutory construction, chapter 207, I believe it is, says you can extend or reduce terms. So the second seat would be extended to 4 years instead of 2 to comply with a 4-year cycle. You just do not know what you're talking about, and Mr. Teege doesn't either.
You're not an attorney. Mr. Teede is. I will rely on his. He's been our township attorney.
Well, Dave, hold on. Let's not argue about what the attorney says. Let's just talk about what the intent is. So we would like the board to direct Mr. Teede to implement the intent of the people. And that's what you didn't do in the original resolution or the creation of that plan. We're asking to modify or correct that. Let's get rid of the past. We want to move forward.
But that will have to wait until the next meeting because of the fact that Mr. T.
They pass resolutions all the time without legal review. So it's just another resolution. And it's no different than any other resolution or action taken today. It's a resolution. If they stepped over their bounds, Mr. TV will correct that and they'll get reviewed, right? And they'll make a correction just as 2015-02 is a correction of previous action. That's all it is. So there's just nothing stopping except for the intent of the people. And the intent of the people is general election, simplified to 4-year. And I just don't understand who would disagree with it. And Lyle, I see the only one is getting to you that you just don't want to consider it and move forward. And I understand the protectionism. You've been here a long time and you've done a lot of great things. But I think the will of the people is here, and that's why we've had the election, why we've had the turnout, and we're going to continue to keep the momentum going. That's why we're here. I want to get rid of this crap of the disagreements. Dave's a great resource. You're a great resource. You guys just butt heads, and there's a long history. We want to end that. The intent of the people is here today, and it's to move to the general election cycle. Figure out with Mr. Teede how to make that work. That's what we're here for. And we don't want it to happen at a staff meeting when nobody's attending, and we want to hear the debate. Rick, we would like to know your opinion. Lyle, we'd like to know your opinion. Why would you not want to move and include everybody in the township? That's what we want to hear. And so you're prolonging the action means it's going to go to another event, regardless of the election. You're going to move to another event venue and time when people may not be able to be here. And if it's at a staff meeting, which none of us have time to attend, that's what we don't want. We want to hear what you have to say. Not Mr. Teede's excuse, not with a legal review. I want to know what you have to say, why you would not want to move towards the intent of the people, or why you believe that we're wrong.
Why, Lyle?
I mean, I just want the debate between you guys to say, hey, this is why we're here. I mean, it is the only reason we're here.
Why not, Lyle?
All right.
Why not?
I appreciate it a lot.
Enough. We had a lot of comments. Okay. I believe Resolution 2015 should be adopted because it has been reviewed by our attorney for correctness, simply to correct the oversight of the interim until the election this fall. Now, if the election this fall, I believe if we need to, we can put at that point the question of moving to even numbered years and shortening the terms of the election.
Why do we have to wait?
I think the
It's
resolution
not a
is
general election this fall. General election is 2016.
I've only heard one supervisor so far comment on the resolution that Dave has put forth. He's expressed his opinion on the merits of that that proposal. I'd like to hear the remaining 2 supervisors comment on that specific proposal. I've only heard one so far.
My opinion is it has not been reviewed by our attorney. Therefore, I think
I'm not asking you for the opinion of the attorney. I want to know what you think.
That's what I think. I think it needs to be reviewed by our attorney.
So you don't want to tell me what it is.
You're dodging your question.
That's all.
You're just dodging the question. Your attorney didn't speak for me when we voted.
Right.
Okay.
Who are attorneys paid?
Let's ask Rick
All the
now.
money.
Well, here,
move on
this
to
is what I
Rick.
think. First off, before we do anything, I have to think legally. We got to clarify because we got two 2015 02s in front of us that we have to deal with. So first off, we got to somehow legally clarify what we're talking
If
about.
we're gonna even talk about that one,
We're gonna call it B.
no.
We got to legally call it.
Three, four, five, yeah.
Didn't you vote on one already?
No,
Yeah, we voted on 3 of them on the 3-2 beer option.
but not these two we're talking about.
For those
Well, you did
approved
vote
by
on
the
number 2 already.
No, we haven't.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, you
Yes,
did.
you
They did.
Did we
were
do
in
the
favor.
table it?
We voted to move it to the end.
Yeah.
Voted.
We voted on it later.
Yeah. No.
No, you voted it down.
They voted and it didn't.
No, I better make sure that's right because that was confusion. I thought we were voting to table it.
Okay, yeah.
We should on the I said I withdraw my vote because that is not what I understood it to be.
And we
So
voted
we
We
did
voted
not.
to table it and then.
Yeah, I thought we were just tabling it at the time. So that's what we did.
I have a question. Was resolution 2015 03, 04, and 05, were they?
Those are the
approved by
resolutions
attorney?
on
Were they approved by the
3-2.
attorney?
That's a standard form that we do every year. Template.
Hey, Rick, I think you guys did vote on 1502. You voted because you voted to pass it. Because Rick and
You voted
Brian
no.
voted nay. So you guys,
Exactly.
you voted on it. It was
It wasn't
motion.
a vote.
It was in motion. It
That
was
was
voted on
table.
table.
To table it.
Table it.
That was to table.
We just tabled it.
That was voting to table.
Well, why did you vote nay?
Okay.
So
So
what
we
is your
have the-
opinion,
yeah.
Rick?
What my thought is, and nobody's,
Go ahead.
if I get, Brian, well, I was waiting for Brian to finish his.
Okay.
So finish yours.
Oh, did I not?
Did you? Okay.
I didn't know. I think, well, just in case I didn't, I said the only thing, I mean, the graph does lay out, the voting schedule would work at 4 years. I didn't really care which way it goes that way. That means nothing to me, but it will work. And I don't see how it would hurt us, other than we might have new blood in, every couple of years. It's possible we'll have new blood in, but I don't see why that's bad. So, all right. Anyways,
Do the same option with the other term.
well, I agree, but I think what we're
The
stuck
difference
with is
okay. The difference is for 4-year terms, it's 3 or 2, 3 or 2.
right.
With 6-year terms, it's 1 or 2, 1 or 2.
Right.
What's wrong with three?
But-
What's wrong with two?
But I mean, what difference does that make? It's
General
one,
election.
it's one difference.
That's it.
It's having the majority of the board up for re-election every other election cycle.
But I mean, so what? That's in theory that everyone gets thrown out, and then someone new comes in. I mean, you're doing a good job. I'm thinking you probably are going to stick around. So I'm not. That doesn't scare me.
Your thoughts, Mr. Keller?
Yeah, no, fine.
There's some extraneous language that's in
Excuse me.
Mr. Nelson's.
Rick has the floor there, I would think.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what he has to say.
To me, I agree with these arguments that Dave has put forth. I thought, I didn't really understand how it was going to come out. To me, it makes sense to do it on years that we're having a normal election anyway. And it would save us I don't know, roughly, looking lower, $1,000.
More than that, yeah.
How much?
Will be the cost of
Yep.
programming the equipment.
So now you have $2,000.
Yep, and then extra
I'd say
balance.
just a couple of grand every cycle that we would vote.
It could go to that handicapped equipment that would help people.
To me, it makes sense to have done it on even years. I was on the board at that time and kind of just went, one of those things that went through. Didn't know about. However, I still think 6 years makes logic in that I still have some trouble with a majority of the board coming up every other cycle, basically. Just for the idea of synergies. It isn't just, there's more to this, and Brian knows already, and Dave knows, he's been on the board. There's a lot more to it than I ever thought there was. There's all kinds of legal things that go along with sitting here. There's things that you can say, there's things you can't say, and if you don't know these things, you can get in big trouble. And I tend to get in trouble once in a while anyway, as everybody knows.
You're doing your job, man.
So that's why I'm still a proponent of 6-year term, because it doesn't bring that up to fruition. You know, most, when you look at, like you say, the other Senate seats or houses, you know, very seldom or never do they ever, majority of them change over.
I think it's 87 senators and twice that number representatives. So it's a really large number.
So it doesn't get changed over.
Yeah,
So
but
there's
that
a lot
happens,
more to it. So that's why I say
that happens every election cycle in the state legislature in the House and in the
it
Congress
does, but it
and the
doesn't,
House
because
of
people don't get
Representatives.
voted out.
Right. That's our point.
But that's our
point, right?
Right. Yeah.
Why would you
If
get
the
voted
electorate,
out?
if the
So that's my
electorate,
opinion. That's
if
my
the
opinion.
electorate is happy
I'm
with you,
saying
you'll still be
even,
there.
But I still think we should go 6.
And if not,
Well, I mean, but
and I still think Peter should look at this, make sure it's right.
But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, we have to vote on it as it's presented, correct?
No.
No, can we amend that?
Yeah.
If we want to amend this,
I still think Peter needs to look at it.
I think we should have, my recommendation, adopt this for now. If you want to vote on this next month or June or whatever, we can do that. After Peter's had the option, then if you want to amend it to 6 years, we can look at that.
Why don't you table the whole issue until after the election?
I second it.
Amen.
Yeah.
Might as well.
That's a
better idea.
That,
Why not?
With no secret meetings.
if we're,
We don't have
have to do
secret
this
meetings,
one,
we
though.
have some meetings in the morning.
Or one meeting. If we table it, then I want to make you guys know that this doesn't come up in the staff meeting, it has to come up at the next board meeting if this gets tabled.
That would be,
yes.
Rick, that would be a great movement on your part. Thank
And
you.
then Peter can at least look at it in the meantime. But I still, me, Rick Keller, I stay 6, okay? Just for, and I told you why.
And
And I
just
still
so
think
that
even is okay. Or better, actually.
if you don't want to act on this one, we have to all agree that seats D and E that will be elected in 2 weeks, or whatever the date is, are interim until the next
We don't
regularly
have to agree on
scheduled.
anything, you already passed resolution 2015-01. You don't have to do anything.
In 1501, it says there for 2 and 4 years.
Right, but that can be changed at the May board meeting with the supervisor on. You don't have to do anything. You don't
Okay,
have to do
that makes
anything,
sense.
so on.
Just leave it like.
I think the other
And
thing,
that's, I believe that's contrary to state law. Anyone at a special election or appointed
It's
is
not
automatically
contrary law. I know more about law than you know about certified ninjas.
We respect
Okay,
that.
okay, let's go.
okay, I think another thing to consider is that I've heard people talking about, oh, we have to go to this training and, you know, St. Cloud, and we have to
There's
go
a
to
lot of
this,
stuff.
this
There's more
and
than you
that.
think.
Well, and so what is being proposed right now is that somebody comes in, I don't know if there's a fee to attend these trainings.
Can,
but
they'll be
what is-
done.
But what is the purpose of somebody that we elect going into all this training and then potentially in November of this year not being on the board anymore?
Wouldn't
I mean,
happen.
we've
The
wasted-
trainings are over soon.
Well, then we got untrained people.
Yes, you're gonna have.
So there's a section.
They only happen once a year.
There's one, but it's not the same in the March sessions, in the March, early April sessions that they have a specific section for newly elected officials.
Right.
which
So you're gonna have to
we do
wait
not
till
have
next
this
year to do
conversation.
that anyhow. So you're gonna have untrained people for
Okay.
6 months, 9 months. Yeah.
Rick, the one thing I wanted to comment on was your comment about the 6-year term, because there's less chance of the numbers on the election cycle. It's
That's
really hard to find another candidate to run for a 6-year term. I mean, that's not. I mean, that's quite a commitment.
It is.
So it's
a
hard.
big commitment anyway.
You're limiting the options out there on that.
It's hard to find someone to run at all.
Yeah.
The only comment I'd like to make is most cities, I believe, run on a short cycle like that. And I got 5 people in council,
Yeah.
and they seem to survive just fine.
Yeah.
You know, having that way. There's generally, if the people are doing what the people want, they retain their seats, you know, because they're doing what the people want. So,
That's what it's all about.
So it's big. That's the only concern.
Okay.
I would think that a synergistic team, like what you talked about, that has learned a lot, is going to be effective. And just to reiterate what you just said, get elected again. I mean, voters want people who are effective, synergistic.
Yeah, that's what I worry about is the synergies.
Right, but I think that the longer term tends to, I mean, I like, you can have a cheetah or a sloth. I mean, if somebody's slow and getting going, you know, and not trained, I mean, a motivated person is going to quickly get trained. They're going to read quickly, they're going to do what they need to do, they're going to work to get that synergy going. I think that I myself would vote for a team that's doing a good job in its election cycle. I want them to stay in. I'm motivated as a voter to keep them in. Because I think voters understand the synergy and teamwork. That's why incumbents, even when they are sloth-like and can get a bad job, still going to stay in. They're probably more likely to get the 6-year or, you know, the double term, even if somebody's not doing a good job. I say that. That's kind of historically what happens in elections. So you're probably still staying on. And have a say.
Well, I'm with Brian on that. If you guys don't want me here, I'm good to go.
What?
You guys can come up here. I don't care.
Well, here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to make a motion to vote on this. We either adopt it or we don't, and if we don't, maybe we'll have to look at it again later.
Adopt which one?
I make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2015-02 that was presented by Dave Millis. As written. Well, we don't
That's
have
been
a...
redated 2015-6.
Oh.
We voted on 345.
We're going to make this 06?
Which one do you want?
The one that Dave...
One that knows.
You can make it whatever number you want. Yes.
Okay.
You can put 5 as the last one. You can make it.
All right. Well, I make a motion that we amend the resolution brought forward by Dave Millis that was originally called 2015-02 to be now called 2015-06.
Okay. I'll second that for discussion.
Okay. Is there anything on that we have not discussed on it so far? Kind of doing this out of order, doing all the discussion. I still think we should wait. We can always adopt it at a later time after the election. My only reason for changing during 1502 was to make it clear to everyone that seats, 2 seats coming up in the very near future are interim seats until the November election is fall.
If this is adopted, then
They'd be
then
interim
it will
seats
be
until
interim seats for a
2018.
year and a half.
Yeah, 2018.
We need a vote on amending
26.
that resolution.
There's a motion on the floor.
Can we have a vote on that? Amending the number.
Okay.
Oh, we haven't.
We never voted.
Okay.
Aye.
So we're voting the number Mr. Millis's.
Okay. Well, we just amended it.
2015.
Okay. Yes. Now, can I just add something before we do anything official? All right. If we vote on the 2015-06 and we vote to approve it and adopt that, if for some reason, okay, then we got to vote on 2015-02. Is there a way to vote on that where I just throwing it out there like something bad? There was something bad with this that none of us saw, and we found out from the county attorney that you absolutely can't do it, and you, for some reason, then can we adopt the language of 2015-02 to amend what we currently have? I know it's convoluted, but if for some reason you could not do this, you couldn't do this, what Dave presented.
There's
That's probably too much.
a discussion about the attorney stating that because to change the terms, the length of the terms that were adopted by the previous election, that should be a question on the ballot. And they haven't come to a firm decision on it yet, but it's the opinion of some attorneys that that's what needs to be done.
needs to stay at 6,
Correct.
unless you have another election.
And
That has
that
Dan.
could be a question. That could be a question on the ballot as well.
You're running, Dan.
Yes.
What's your feeling on the term lengths? I mean, I'd like to know from a candidate's perspective. Did you have a preference? Do you care?
I really don't, because, you know, I don't know much of what you guys are doing, but
And it's irrelevant at this point because
I'm a nobody.
at an interim, that's not correct. As an interim, the term that would be up would be either 2 or 4 to get on the cycle. And I forget what sheet you're.
D.
D. I believe D is
The short one, yeah.
Right, D's the 2, E's the 4.
Yeah. So, but we're both up as of
This is coming November.
yeah. So,
Well, you know, I've heard both sides of it, and I honestly don't see a reason that we can't do this. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, things have been done before that without consulting the lawyer first. And like I said, the last one was not right, and it was fixed. So if we're doing something that can't be done, I would imagine the lawyer would tell us. I mean, what would be the reason that we can't do it?
Well, I think for one thing, it should be clear that at the end of election, people know that there will be an election this fall. And if we want to go to even numbered years elections, that can be a question on that election this fall. And if they want to go to 4-year terms instead of 6-year, that can be a question also.
So you're saying that we cannot legally amend it to go to even year elections without having a special vote by the people?
Right, by the election.
Well, let's just vote on it.
That's
If the lawyer throws us out, well, you know, I've talked to lawyers and their opinions are really something. I've never gotten a straight answer from a single one. So
It depends.
it depends. I've heard that.
How many times
It
I tell you
depends.
that?
Yes, it's all you ever hear. So, all right, I make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2015-06
You've already done that.
as written. Well, we didn't actually. Well, but it got.
He seconded it. For
No, that was
discussion.
to amend the number.
That was
Oh, that's to amend the number?
which we did.
Oh, yeah, boy.
I thought the motion was to adopt it.
I'm going to adopt it as written.
All in favor?
We've had a lot of discussion.
There has to be a
We've had
second.
discussion of it.
Waiting for it.
Is there a second on the motion to adopt
Oh, yeah. we did that.
2015-06 as written?
I just don't like 4 years.
Is there a second?
So no. I would second it if it wasn't for 4 years. So I just don't like.
We can get
But that can be amended, correct?
Oh.
If need be.
Or we change it now.
You can second and then move to amend.
Right.
Like a second for discussion.
Discussion. Okay, now I'll second it for discussion.
Okay.
So there you go. Now you got it
Now
on the
we're
table.
discussing. Okay.
Now we can discuss it. I don't like 4 years. Told you that. I think we should do 6 for the reasons I've said.
Well,
6 in the even numbered years.
I would say this, after talking to the prospective candidates and getting their opinion,
Keep it in line.
did you?
I think we should go at 6,
Okay.
just because of the fact that you're going to have 3 new people that don't know anything,
Potentially.
possibly.
Okay.
We're going to have 3. Brian just came on board last month.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And we'll have 2
well, you
people,
got
because we have 2 new seats.
3 educated people,
And we
and you'll
have-
have 2 that won't be because of the fact that there's not going to be that education, that training.
So that's why
I'm not sure how educated I am yet. I'm trying, but I don't know still, so there's a lot to learn.
I know. Listen, there's a lot more than you guys think.
So, and I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there because I do care about what the people think, but I know, Dave, you drafted this. Do you have any issue with going to 6 personally?
I think the most important thing is the November election of the even numbered year.
Yeah, I think that was the intent.
Yeah.
That was our big
I
intent.
don't think anybody would argue.